an open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. It's the 25th of October 2014. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur Event. I'm your host, Walter Hendricks, coming to you from the Netherlands, where it's 4 p.m. It's 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. How you doing, everybody? If you go to UCY.tv, mouse over shows, click on any of them, you will end up in the chat room. There's a couple of people there, Jax, JJ, Jules, Ochali, Vince, who seems to be AFK, had to do something. Monica, welcome. Gringo, what's up? And two Anons. How you doing, everybody? Today we're going to skip the Mahabharata talk. We're going to, for this week at least, do a PDF that I received from Jared about the Trivium. So, hey Jax, what's up? If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Do so in capital letters so they will easily stand out for me and I know when to react. Let's get into this. I believe that our education system in the United States is broken. And that's not only in the United States, that's just about everywhere. And that if given the tools of learning, you can Google also that, the tools of learning. I think I did 2 shows on that. You'll find them at YouTube. Anyone can get a high-quality education in a do-it-yourself manner without attending any college or even high school. What you will read here is not found in any public school, and even though some homeschoolers have a certain version of it, they've never known it in this way. Nobody has until now. This is a beginner's guide to the liberal arts, known as the Trivium, which focuses on the practical skills instead of the academic subjects. So liberal arts, there's 7 of them. Trivium is the first 3, and Quadrivium is the other 4. It does not provide a curriculum of any kind. It also does not go into great depth on any of the 3 Trivium subjects. You will need textbooks and or audio courses for that. There is no way around it. But where it lacks in complete detail and ready-made lesson plan, it makes up for it in broad strokes and dependable outlines. You can get yourself started just with this essay and a little creativity. This essay focuses on study skills. I prefer to call them learning skills because I studied a lot in school, but I didn't learn very much. I certainly didn't learn that I could approach the learning of any subject in almost the exact same way. Alright, that's what the Trivium is. Acquainting yourself with the Trivium will show you that you can tackle any topic with this method. Alright, it's called the Trivium method. And I certainly didn't learn that I could educate myself to a very high degree without going to college. Most of what I learned in school was memorized in short term in order to complete homework assignments and pass the tests. I had to jump through hoops. No real learning was required. Just enough memorization and understanding to fill in some blanks. Do you remember Algebra 2 or Chemistry still? 10 points if you do. Once upon a time in the United States there was a thing called one-room schoolhouse, or dame school. Good morning, Jules. And it was unique because it put students in all ages of a larger room together with a teacher acting as facilitator. She would provide basic instructions, but as the older students learned the material, they would help to teach the younger students. While it wasn't a perfect system, that attitude of more experienced students helping newer students learn runs through this entire essay. It wasn't until Horace Mann, that's Horacemann, Horace Mann, introduced the Prussian model of education into the United States schools, that students were broken up into age groups and given lectures instead of hands-on instructions. The basic pattern set by Mann lingers with us to this day. The Prussian model of education was designed to make the population of Prussia docile and subservient to the will of the king. This is antithetical to the liberal attitude towards education, or the liberal attitude in general. It's amazing how little we are taught about Horace Mann, considering the impact he had on education. I do not here propose a plan to introduce the trivium into modern schooling. Why not? But I do think it's worth raising the question, is school completely necessary anymore? In this essay I provide you with over 20 study skills, many of which can be used right away. Taken together, these skills will develop within you the means to conquer any knowledge and learn any subject. Most say you should start by learning the trivium subjects first. I don't, says Jared here. This is written by Jared Sanchez, guys. So anything he says he means him, not me. People want to get into the method, but they don't know where to start. Well, I don't know, we start with grammar, right? And they're not ready to jump into the deep end first. What they need is a helping hand to show them a few moves before they swim off on their own. And this essay is that helping hand. In his book, A Student's Guide to Liberal Learning, James V. Schal, S.J., that's S, that's Schal, that sounds like a Dutch name, James V. Schall, S.J. writes, the learning that is here described is called liberal, that is, freeing. It takes a lot of work to be free, yet we need some way to become what we are. Yeah, talking about freedom of mind, right? Not freedom from oppression by the government or any other instance or person. No one can do this for us, but we cannot do it merely by ourselves either. We need guides to find guides. Sometimes that Aristotle... Oh no, not sometimes. Something that Aristotle once said should be reiterated here. Yeah. Namely, that many people who do not know books are nevertheless very wise, often wiser than the so-called learned. Perhaps it would be our grandfather or an ordinary farmer or worker. We should look for and respect the experience of ordinary people. Wherever there is a mind and reality, someone can find the truth. Yeah, that's one thing as a philosopher I would totally agree with. This in no way lessens our drive to know more completely and to seek guidance of good books, good teachers, good parents, good libraries, good friends. This essay is a guide to find guides. It cuts right to the heart of the matter. How do I apply the trivium method today? Yeah, same as we did in the past, I'm thinking. The trivium method is mirroring how your mind works. And so, right, that doesn't change unless we go through some massive evolutionary jump or whatever. There is enough information here to give you some understanding of the whole territory. I've provided you with a very good map, but don't think that I'm talking all of the hard work out of this. I'm not taking the journey for you. If you want to get anything out of this instruction, you have to put in the hard work. The point is to learn how to become self-taught. Another point I'd like to comment on from that quote above is the concept of this education being freeing. The word liberal itself means befitting a free person. And this is an important distinction since history is full of stories about the mass of people being in one form of slavery or another. Ancient Rome built its society on slavery, with the free citizens being the ones that received a liberal education. Nowadays, people talk about wage slaves, just capable enough to hold jobs that barely pay the bills, but never able to rise above their low economic conditions and live with the same modest wealth. Quote is on the side here. It says, "School is not education. Education begins where school ends." That's from Mortimer J. Adler. Debt slave is another one I've seen before. Debt slave holds especially true for the millions of college students that took out student loans thinking that they would be able to pay them off easily, only to graduate into a slow job market with enough debt to buy a small home with. I don't get that. How do you have enough debt to buy a small home? Where is the freedom in that? The topic to this morning, Dan, is no aesthetic penises this day. Dan, we're doing some trivium. Welcome, by the way. Where's the freedom in that? The irony is, most colleges bill themselves as liberal arts schools. Really? There's something inherently wrong in that. An education that keeps you enslaved economically is not one that frees you. He calls BS, says here. I'm not an academic or someone that is trying to write for academics. A few years ago I found out about the trivium and decided it was worth learning. In some of my spare time, over the years, I've begun collecting my thoughts on this method and ways to present it better. By being in touch with other people looking into the same thing, I realized that there was a lack of beginner's material out there. Well, is that so? I mean, Jan Irvin, who has a very nice website, triviumeducation.com, it's a very good place to start, as far as I know, anyway. So I decided it was best to focus on writing something for the average, everyday people that happen to stumble upon this path. This essay is a good start for me, and each skill listed will become fleshed out in more details as my own learning process. Yeah, that's also what Jared is doing here. This is the rhetoric stage of the trivium. So he's practicing rhetoric here, right? If there's anything this essay lacks in its examples, and there will certainly be many more of those in the versions to come. Oh, cool, there's gonna be more. That's good. Because we're racing through this one. Since I'm writing for a wide audience, you won't find any citations. There will probably be some grammatical errors, loose language, and even false assertions. And I'm going to assume that you will follow up this essay with research of your own. My mission is not to write at the level of the professor. Yeah. Don't cut yourself short here. You know, how many professors do you think are even able to write about the trivium, huh? But at the level of the person next door, whether or not I accomplish this task, only time and a few honest emails will tell. Yeah. I suppose you can get his email if you Google Jared Sanchez. Consider this essay a citizen's project, a layman's effort, and not a professional work. Why not? I think this is very professional, especially, since universities, they call themselves professional when they are not, I will work towards writing things at the academic level in the future, but for now we need something a little simpler. The best way to use this guide is to read it once or twice, making notes as you go along. After getting familiar with the whole piece and the basic concepts, take a few skills and use them right away. It's really not even studying that you're doing, it's practice. Yeah, I would say it's practice of a correct use of the mind. That's what I would say. Dan is happy we're doing the trivium. Blah blah. Put in half an hour each night or a couple of hours on the weekend. No, do this 24/7. This is how your mind works. There's no way around it. If I do my job well in explaining things to you, and you do your job well in applying what you've learned, then after some time you will be ready to tackle any subject you want to learn all on your own. Yeah, not only that, it also boosts your self-esteem immensely. Alright? And then he says, may this guide serve you well. J. Sanchez, May 21st, 2014. That was the introduction, guys. So, scrolling over some empty spaces here. Part 1. The beginning. More scrolling. They say it's best to start a piece of writing with a good quote. Who says? I seem to have misplaced the one quote that I wanted to start the essay with. So you'll have to excuse me as I'm still an amateur in the field of educational writing. If I would have found the quote that I had meant to show you, you would probably have some sense of interest in the words that follow, and most likely because the quote has something to do with solving difficult problems easily, or the truth that every man and woman is a genius, whether they know it or not. Had you read that quote, you might be thinking that there's something in this writing that you're looking for. Maybe a simpler answer, a shortcut, a key. If only I could find the quote. To be honest, I'm not even sure if the quote was attributed to the right person or not. You know how the internet is, so full of misinformation and false attributions. I might add contradictions. You know, I mean, even I play a game, right? World of Warcraft. You all know that, right? And in order to play the game right, you need to do some research. Like, I've got a rogue, right? That's my main character. It's a damage dealing, weapon wielding monster. And there's a lot of things going on in World of Warcraft. Lately we've had an update to Warlords of Draenor, and a lot of things have changed. Like, they've removed hit and expertise, which had to do with your chance to hit a monster, or that the monster would block or even dodge your attack. They removed all that. And they also changed a couple of things regarding critical hit chance and haste and mastery. Those are all things that fine-tune your character, right? So haste used to be the most important statistic, or stat as they call it, for a rogue, for a combat rogue, that is, because there's different kind of rogues. There's also assassination rogue and subtlety rogue. But I like combat rogue. It has a slow main hand and a fast offhand. And so you used to be that haste is the most important, because the more times you hit with that weapons, and more haste means faster speeds, faster attacks. The more damage you do, the more energy you regenerate, energy you need to use, special skills, and the more times your target gets poisoned. Right? So the more damage you do, that's the whole idea behind being a rogue, doing damage. So they've changed all of that, and now it seems that critical hit chance is the most important statistic for a combat rogue. And so I had to do some research regarding this. And there's contradictions about that also on the internet. And so you've got to find a target practice thingy in-game that are all over the place. A target dummy. And you get yourself an add-on that shows how much damage you do and where your damage comes from, and so on and so on. And so you make changes to your character and see what that does, right? That's a way of doing research. Yeah, Dan, that's more or less true. Dan says, sounds like they dumbed down World of Warcraft, made it easy for dummies to play. They did that a long time ago, though. Yeah, they did that a long time ago. It was really, really hard when vanilla was. And this is when the World of Warcraft first came out and the maximum level was 60. It was really a tough game. And you needed a lot of knowledge about your own character to be able to play it right. They made it easier. They also made it easier to level your character, right? The maximum level now is 90. Soon that will be going to 100. And it used to take like months before you leveled a bit. Right? Not one level, but many levels. It would take months. Now, like one day or one night, I can level 5 levels from 80 to 85. I just did that yesterday. So, they made it much more easy for the younger players, for the children, I guess. But there's a lot of older people, especially 28 plus, that play World of Warcraft. There really are a lot of them. Alright, I could go on about World of Warcraft. It's really nice, or about raids and stuff, you know. But contradictions everywhere, guys. Let's continue here. It could have been Henry Ford that was quoted by Abe Lincoln that said it. So much for the big opener. Yeah, he can't find his quote, right? Can we just assume that you read the quote? What quote? that you feel some sort of inspiration or expectation of enlightenment. Yeah. That word enlightenment I would like to say something about, because it's kind of vague, right? It's just floating in the air there, that word enlightenment. There's few people enlightened in society today. And you can tell by the way they act, right? They don't watch TV that much, you know, or they don't even have a TV. They think for themselves, right? That's one thing. Thinking for yourself is very important. Now and then they might have an original thought. Huh? Something that has never been thought before by anybody else. Try and do that. You know how hard that is? Do you know how stuck most people's minds are? They think what they are being, quote unquote, told to think. Right? That's no way of being enlightened. Enlightened means think for yourself. Among other things. Continuing. And that you are ready to follow these words wherever they lead? Okay, good. I want to go into new territory with you. New places that offer special rewards. That sounds so much like World of Warcraft. Yeah, new areas with special rewards. Yep. Valuable treasures recognized in every land. Yeah. It was late in 2009 that I first discovered the educational paradigm of the trivium. And since that time I've spent numerous unpaid hours. Unpaid hours? Of course it's unpaid. This is for your own education. And since then I've spent numerous unpaid hours digging and researching and uncovering many artifacts in this amazing learning path. What I've found continues to amaze me. No, not continuous. What I've found continues to amaze me. I was looking for a way to improve my mind and to, quote, open, get smart, quote, close. Without having to get a college degree. But I had no idea just how much I would uncover in my investigation. There have been those that believe the trivium should be kept to an elite few. Really? Yeah. With an emphasis on class division and corporate leadership. Yep. And also those that believe it should be taught with an emphasis on religious authority. What about appeal to authority, right? But I didn't spend countless hours reading through endless text on ancient pedagogical methods just to be told that you're not rich enough or obedient enough to receive the teaching. Yeah, obedience is not a prerequisite to study the trivium. On the opposite side, on the contrary, I mean, obedience is not a good trait, right? Some of the texts that I have read were so dry, they should have been handed out with a glass of water. Despite the chore of absorbing so much material and having no idea where my studies would lead to, I carried on. Whenever I wanted to give up, my intuition told me that the reward would be worth the effort. My intuition served me well, and the rewards have been greater than all the hard work. A new world opened up to me. Yeah. A new relationship with my mind emerged. I learned that I could conquer any challenge and learn any subject or skill, regardless of the difficulty or how smart or stupid I thought I was. I discovered a secret of the ancients, possessed by so many of history's greatest minds, and I should hold this back from you? I say, Can't we bend the rules a bit, just this once? Whoever you are that is reading this, you most likely arrived here in search of something you heard about, either from a podcast interview, a YouTube video, or a random book find at Barnes & Noble. Something made you curious enough to bring you here. Maybe it was talked about as some sort of secret trick that made you smarter than everyone else, or an educational model that is the best one in the whole world, giving you a Harvard education in the comfort of your own home. Or maybe, just maybe, you're like I was, and you felt that there's something deeper to this subject than a short overview or video could possibly cover, and you want to know more. Whatever your reason is, you're here to learn. More specifically, you're here to learn how to learn. When I first found out about the trivium, my mind was a mess. Yeah, that's not so fortunate. My thoughts had become disorganized and chaotic, causing my memory to become deficient and my thought processes to be sluggish. Memory recall atrophied. Okay, I don't know that word. Atrophied. Vocabulary dwindled, and to use the language of computers, my processing speed had become greatly reduced. I grew up always being one of the smart kids in school, known for acing tests with little study. And there I was, unable to maintain focus long enough to read a challenging book, or easily forgetting what I was saying in conversation, and noticing a stark reduction in my ability to problem solve. How did this happen? I can trace it back to one specific day in high school. While many of my friends... Hold on, guys. While many of my friends in high school enjoyed skipping class to go fulfill their hedonistic impulses, one day I decided to do something a little different. I was going to sneak into the school library. As dorky as that sounds, I had a real purpose. My teacher for senior honors English had us reading a fictional book in which the character, an above-average intellectual teenager, ended up reading through the works of Thomas Aquinas. There were few in my graduating class that enjoyed words as much as I did. And so reading about this teenage character tackling some of the most complicated and well-written books in history was inspiring. Thank you, Dan. Atrophied is afgemat. It means you like tiring. Alright, you get tired from it. Afgemat is Dutch. Dan just put that in chat for me because, you know, I'm Dutch. English is just my second language, so. I'd always felt that I should be reading the great books, but didn't really know where and how to start. Yeah, I don't know if that's such a good idea to read these great books. I'm suspicious of them, that there might be a lot of control in there. You know, it's just like Aristotle, the Republic. If you don't know, if you're not already enlightened, you might be drawn into thinking from an elitist standpoint of view, which makes you an asshole. So you have to be very careful. So I decided to ditch class one day and sneak my way into the library. You needed a pass signed by a teacher to be in the library. Yeah, what's that all about, right? Why would you fracking need a pass to get into the library? Shouldn't that just be free for everybody? Heading to a table near the reference section, I picked out a few titles from the Great Books of the Western World series produced by Hutchins and Adler, Plato, Aquinas and Descartes. I believe were the ones that I picked. Yeah. For the better part of a few class periods I sat in front of those books, looking deeply into them and trying to comprehend what I read there. By the end of it, not only did I have a headache, but I also came to two conclusions. 1. I did not understand what I was reading and thought that it was way beyond my reading level. And even if I were to read any of these books well enough to understand what was written there, I realized that it would take me about an entire year at the rate I was going. Alright, that's not long, a year. Even if I took up the task and plowed through one of Plato's books for 6 months, that's conclusion number 2 he draws, I'd still have a dozen more books to get through, of the same difficulty level, before I could say I was educated. Yeah. A friend of mine said, that's old stuff. And there's new philosophers out there. Yeah, Dan, not allowed to go to the library. Your papers have to be in order. Excuse me. Yeah. Needless to say, I was crushed. There I was at the edge of my peer group, too smart to play dumb and too dumb to play smart. I was caught in a no man's land of the mind. I gave up. Alright. Yeah. Now he's probably gonna explain how the trivium method got him rid of that giving up. From that day on, I had no real interest in pursuing the intellectual potential within me. It just didn't seem worth working 2 or 3 decades just to feel like I'd arrived somewhere that most people have no interest in anyway. It was 10 years later and a lot of mental degeneration before I decided that enough was enough, and I began to take responsibility for my mind. No later than a week after I'd set this intention within myself, I came across the trivium. That is strange, right? That sometimes that happens to me also. You set out some intention and then it comes on your path. It sounds a bit like law of attraction, what the New Agers always tell you. It's strange. Have any of you guys ever had that? You set out some intention and it just comes on your path? I think intention is a very strong force within you, just as focus is also a very strong force. Another word is attention. That's your energy. You give attention, right? It's a very strong force. There's a Dutch guy, whose name I don't remember at this point, but he said, that which you give attention grows. And that seems to be correct. In October of 2009, I listened to a podcast episode on the subject of the trivium, in which the guest began to lay out the fundamentals of what is now known as the trivium method. The interview, put into 3 parts, covered a wide variety of subjects relevant to the show. Sounds like Jan Irvin did an interview. But the overarching theme seemed to be, there is a better way to educate yourself. It's not widely known about, but it has historical roots, and it's here for your discovery. Immediately, I intuited that whatever this trivium thing was, it was just what I was looking for. A week before, when I had set my intention to clean up the attic of my mind, I had planned to use a particular method of reading that I had come across once somewhere on the internet. the method went something like this. Read a book, one chapter at a time, and before continuing on to the next chapter, review in reverse the chapter or chapters you have already read. So after reading chapter 1, you review it and make sure you understand the main points. Then you read chapter 2. Yeah, I remember doing that with math at school, because I knew that if you didn't understand chapter 1 and 2, that there's no way you're gonna understand chapter 3. So I used to, check them again. Made sure I knew that what was written there was understood. Before reading chapter 3, you review chapter 2, then chapter 1, and so on. Like this until you finish the book. Not a bad way to really get to understand something. I was content to stick with that method and still do to this day find it a solid, simple approach to reading. But something in the trivia material made me consider expanding my studies into this new field called the liberal arts and sciences. The liberal arts and sciences are a grouping of 7 subjects. The trivium, consisting of the 3 subjects grammar, logic and rhetoric, and the quadrivium, consisting of the 4 subjects arithmetic, it's number, geometry, number and space, music, number and time, and astronomy, number and time and space. So you see the quadrivium is a lot about number. The trivium deal with the mind, and the quadrivium with the matter. Alright, so trivium is here brackets open arts, and quadrivium sciences. This group of 7 subjects, as well as numerous variations containing more or less subjects, has its origins in ancient Hindu and Greek cultures. Yeah, it's odd that you say that, because these two do not fit in the same time frame, right? So if you say origins, then it's Hindu, not Greek. The Greeks copied it, like they copied so many things. The Greeks are known as latecomers, all right? And it was revived in the Roman era, and once again during the Middle Ages, each time forming in a way peculiar to the time and place. Yeah, that I don't understand. Because a mind, how it worked 5,000 years ago in India, is the same as the mind works today. Not only was the trivium presented as a historical grouping of subjects, it was actual method for learning called the integrated trivium. The integrated trivium incorporates all of the knowledge of the 3 subjects and combines them with a 3-part metaphor for the learning process, in which grammar, logic and rhetoric, specifically in that order, symbolize the natural mental processes of absorbing information. Exactly. See, so it doesn't matter in what time, if it was 5,000 or 10,000 years ago, our mind still works that way, you know? Right? Again, the learning process in which grammar, logic and rhetoric symbolize the natural mental processes of absorbing information, that's the grammar, organizing information, that's logic, and communicating information, that's rhetoric. Grammar asks the who, what, where and when. Logic answers the why, and rhetoric provides the how. The theory goes that the trivium subjects emerged as a result of our minds handling information in this way. Yeah. I'm not so sure about that either. This is just me, right? But you know, my suspicious mind, right? I'm thinking that this trivium method has always been used against us in some form or another. Because if you know how people's minds work, you can easily influence them. You see? You can not only influence, even control. That's why I call all of the other people out there, most of them anyway, like 95% or so, maybe more, mind controlled. They have no mind of their own. Their mind is made for them. Just as we learn the basics of a language through exposure to general grammar, right, as opposed to, this is odd, I thought it was special grammar. That's how you learn a language, special grammar. General grammar is about building blocks, data. So let's try this again. Just as we learn the basics of language through the exposure of general grammar, he says here, which I think should be special grammar, anyway, when we absorb new information about a subject, skill, or situation, we start to form in our minds the grammar. Yes. Just as we learn to discern between truth and falsehood in formal logic, we obtain the logic of something as we begin making sense of the incoming data, that's your general grammar, and connect it with the other previous knowledge, antecedently known. And just as we learn the persuasive arts and classical rhetoric, those skills necessary to communicate to an audience or a listener effectively, we grasp the rhetoric of a thing, when we are able to discuss it and even to teach it to somebody else. Yeah? He said this before, but it's also the use of the first two. Right? Rhetoric has grammar and logic in it, and it provides the how, right? So it's also the use, not only just being able to teach someone else. While the literal subjects emerged as a result of the three-part mental process, the skills they provide actually enhance and support the process, creating a dynamic relationship between skills and method. While I didn't have an immediate grasp of the subject, I did have confidence that if I just applied myself to learning this approach, to learning these subjects and this method, then all of my intellectual troubles could be dealt with, and I could plumb the depth of my mental potential without being intimidated or giving up. Yeah? I was right to have such confidence. Indeed you were. I did find what I was looking for. That thing that I always knew existed, even though I never knew what it was. Imagine something for a moment. You're sitting at the computer, writing a paper for class, or an email to a friend, or even a funny Facebook update. Once you know what it is you want to say, your fingers hit the keys, and those keys signal little electronic impulses to get sent into the computer. This is the grammar. Yeah, very good explanation. Next, those electronic impulses make their way into the computer processor where it is made sense of. Yeah, for the computer, right? All of those ones and zeros are translated and organized. Basically, your computer figures out what it is supposed to do. Yeah, that's based on some rules that the computer works by. This is the logic, right? So same goes for us. We have to learn what is logic. So you apply the correct rules, not that you make incorrect conclusions. No, not incorrect conclusions. Incorrect arguments, right? faulty arguments. Those are fallacies. Then your computer displays on the screen inappropriate symbols, the appropriate symbols, given the specific keys you hit. All of those ones and zeros become numbers and letters. Sentences begin forming on the page. Your ideas, in the form of information, went through a process of encoding and decoding, transforming the knowledge from one place, your mind, to another, the computer screen. This is the rhetoric. Another way to say it is that this is your input, process, output. The computer analogy demonstrates this very basic idea behind the trivium method. While our minds are not linear like a computer processor, we go through similar functions of manipulating information and recommunicating what we know. I first encountered this notion of a three-part process in Antero Ali's book, Angel Tech, in which he describes the three functions of intelligence as being to absorb, organize, and communicate. Dan is asking a question in the chat. This is not a book, it's an essay written by Jared Sanchez about trivium. If you write that in Google, Jared Sanchez, trivium, essay, you will get it. I find those terms more suitable to the function of the mind than computer terms. So I will continue to use them primarily throughout this text. But anywhere you see those terms written, they could be replaced with any other of these terms, of these sets. Let's try this again. But anywhere you see those terms written, they could be replaced with any other of these sets terms. Grammar, logic, rhetoric, input, process, output, knowledge, understanding, wisdom. Alright, so that's all the same. Next part is called refutation. Before going on to the meaty part, good morning, Dal! How you doing, buddy? Before going on to the meaty part of this essay, which covers the trivium skills, I want to address some disagreements with liberal arts education that have been raised over the past few years. Essentially, I can boil down these arguments into three categories: elitist, religious, and snobbish. Lol. The elitist argument goes something like this. A proper or liberal education should only be left in the hands of people that come from a certain social and economic background, facilitating the distinction between a type of managerial class and the workers' class. Numerous historical documents show that this is true. While I have not spent much time researching this aspect of the trivium history, a simple internet search will provide leads for the curious. Yeah, this just reminds me of the caste system in India, right? Where the Brahmanas know everything. They tell the Kshatriyas how to wage war. And the Vaishyas how to toil the land. And the Sudras how to be slaves. Something like that. Yeah. Managerial class, that's the Brahmanas. Worker class, that's everything beneath them. Alright, Brahmanas are elitists. No doubt about it. There is no moral code that is guaranteed with the trivium. By keeping this education in the hands of the elites and away from the common folk, a great treasure has been deprived from the very people that need to be uplifted by it the most. Yeah. What is left out of education is sometimes more important than what is included. Well, I would just scratch the sometimes there. You know, school, it's nothing more than getting you ready to work as a obedient slave to keep the system rolling. Even providing the people with some parts of the liberal education is not enough. For what good is a citizenry that can reason well and use poetic language but cannot engage in civic duties effectively? Alright, so what the heck are civic duties? I mean, I got a problem with that term already. You know, sounds like civic duties. And it's just me talking here, right? But just sounds like you are born in this world and you've already got duties. You're a civilian and this is what you do. Right? So it's people that are put in a cage of how to act, and all the animals are free. Right? It should be the other way around. People should rule the animals, not be ruled by some code of civic duties or whatever. Providing the semblance of education without the tools of social construction gives one the illusion of education. Next heading is all education is political. The religious argument is not so much against people obtaining a liberal arts education, it's against people obtaining it outside of the realm of religious authority. Yeah, do you know those two don't like really good go together good? The whole word here is authority, right? Religious authority, appeal to authority. That's a fallacy, remember? Even Dorothy Sayers, author of the essay The Lost Tools of Learning, and someone I've taken many great ideas from, described the trivium best as being subordinate to theology. Huh. That's not what I was taught. You get into theology after you've done the 7 liberal arts, right? Then theology becomes something that you might be interested in, just like philosophy, sculpture, things like that. Another argument that usually comes from the religious camp is that the trivium leads away from the spiritual and towards the materialistic, when not guided by theological or spiritual doctrine. Yeah. Well, the problem here is that when they say spiritual, they mean dogma. There's nothing spiritual about religion these days. It's always used to control you. There's nothing spiritual about it. Never have I had any issue with someone holding their faith dearly. But what I do disagree with is that this education should be kept within the realm of faith. Yeah, absolutely. It's ridiculous. Primarily, I think this way because not everyone holds the same beliefs. Yeah. I think that way because belief has nothing to do with the trivium. The trivium teaches you not to believe, but to know. To realize, not believe something. I rarely discuss my own spiritual and religious beliefs in public. But I do know for sure that I cannot honestly tell someone else that theirs is wrong and mine is right. Yeah? That's good. It just can't be done in good conscience. The whole structure of religion is based first upon understanding of faith. An understanding of faith? Or having faith? And from there, you can deduce all sorts of religious logic. Yeah, I wouldn't call that logic. It's like what they say in the Vedas, right? These, what the Hindus, I call them Hindus, but there's just a group of religious streamings, religious paths one can take. They also have this idea of absolute nature, absolute properties, and they base a whole logical system on that, right? But there is no evidence at all for a real existence of these absolute properties. So the whole logical building that is put on that, using absolute properties as a foundation, is shaky, because there is no evidence for these absolute truths, these absolute natures to be there in reality. So it's shaky, all this religious logic. Alright, try this again. Where was I? The whole structure of religion is based first upon the understanding of faith, and from there you can deduce all sorts of religious logic, which is only valid based upon its own premises of faith. Yeah, exactly. That's what I just tried to explain. It's based on faith. So I wouldn't call that logic. You know, logic is supposed to lead you to truth, and proof is one important thing when it comes to logic. Faith and proof, you know, they kind of rule each other out, you know? And to go even further, some people hold no religion or spiritual belief whatsoever and decide instead to base their understandings on empirical and or measurable evidence. To base logical conclusions upon premises of evidence and premises of faith are two completely different modes of knowledge. Yeah, I wouldn't call one knowledge in the first place. If it's faith, it's not knowledge. And so much disagreement and upset comes from people's inability to realize this fact. 1702, guys. Let's play some music from Poker Face, right? And we'll be right back.
You gonna hit one? Johnny! Good for you one, man. Mr. Solvinur. Back to work. The song is called Survive off of our fifth disc, Peace or War. We want peace, but these mother effers want war. Thank you. Stay tuned, still speaker band to go.
Alright guys, welcome back. Welcome in the chat. And on 37, Banjoy, Del, Dan, Jax, JJ, Joe, Jules, Charlie, Vince, seems to be FK, and Cap, and One, and None. Welcome everybody. How you doing? Let's get back into where we were. The other argument that the trivium unhinged from spiritual dogma will lead to materialism is not necessarily true. For those that choose to believe only in the material, it is only a moment of faith that can change their mind. For someone that chooses to believe in something beyond the physical, the trivium does not preclude one from doing so. The trivium aids the student in discerning truth from falsehood, and however it is applied is up to the student entirely. There are no guarantees of ultimate truth here. He spells truth with a capital T. It is what I'm saying, right? No guarantees of ultimate truth. To each their own, but be better for the world by your studies, I say. Next heading, to each their own. The snobbish argument is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek term. By this, I mean that there are those that say the trivium, and by extension the quadrivium, is not a complete education for an individual, or that the trivium only supplies one with an aesthetic appreciation of the arts and literature, and little more than that. I agree on the first point and disagree on the second. The trivium is certainly not a complete education for an individual. No, it helps you get an education into anything that you like. And that's what the trivium is. What it provides, the intellectual muscle so highly needed in society. This probably should have read, what it provides is the intellectual muscles so highly needed in society, but it does nothing for the emotional and physical education of that individual. To address the discrepancy, I've included some sections on emotional and physical development as necessary components of a well-rounded education. The trivium does provide a full set of critical thinking tools, and this provides you with the ability to discern facts from fallacy. Hey, Ben. You can Skype me, Solvinur, Ben, Joey, and tell us what that's about if you like your website. Skype me at Solvinur and I'll get you on the air so you can tell us a little bit about it. Why don't you call in, Ben? You're welcome. The appreciation of art in its various forms is a gift awarded to our species alone. And it is true that the study of liberal arts in particular will expose one person to this deep aspect of culture. To say this gift is the only reward of the liberal arts is to miss what is most valuable about them. These arts provide the student/seeker with the freedom to be comfortable in the face of uncertainty, the courage to navigate the chaos of the unknown, to question that which is often accepted without thought, the ability to find one's bearings in all situations and, hopefully, develop a sense of what is right action in each moment. In this way, we can speak of these as the liberating arts. No, Ben. No way. The trivium method provides one with critical thinking skills as well as learning and study skills, life skills. This is about uplifting your mind and improving not only the world inside of you, but the world around you as well. Next heading. The tools of learning have been found. Scrolling through some empty pages here. Part 2, the skills. Now we get into the major portion of this essay, the one you've been waiting for. This is the part where you are given the keys to the trivium in a way that has never been done before. This is something new. Every generation interprets the arts differently. What follows is the trivium as seen through a 20th century mind. Next heading. This is the next step. And this is a copy from the website Trivium Education. There's a triangle there, which you can find with 4 circles, 3 at the outside, 1 in the middle. Grammar, logic and rhetoric are the 3 outer circles, making a triangle. They all connect to the center circle, which says truth. Alright, you can check that out for yourself at triviumeducation.com. Absorb. This is where it all begins. You're absorbing as much information as you can about a subject, a skill, or a situation. Yeah. That's what I did with 9/11. It took me 3 years before I had the idea that, yeah, now I've got enough information. Now I've got enough grammar, right? Now let's start putting these blocks of data together and see what fits and what doesn't. Where are the contradictions? Don't try to understand everything, just become familiar with what you encounter. Form new maps. Universal outlines emerge. You begin to detect patterns, see a bigger picture. Here you encounter the raw material that your mind uses to construct an understanding. Yeah? You hear grammar logic there, right? Here you encounter the raw material, that's your data, your building blocks, your grammar, that your mind uses to construct an understanding, that's your logic, right? Be discerning in your choice of materials. Now comes numbers, a couple of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1. Deconstruction. 2. Taking notes, annotation. 3. Spaced repetition. 4. Discover the history of a subject. 5. Distinguishing materials. 6. Selection. And 7. Concentration. Logic is the next heading. Hold on, guys. Blah. Organize. This is where things get unmessy. You have a wealth of information, now sort through it all. Make sense, eliminate contradictions. New words jump out at you asking for definition. Now he says, bring order to chaos. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Light to the darkness. Yeah. Light to the darkness. That doesn't mean that the darkness goes away. It just means that you understand the dark side. Alright? Most of your time will be spent here. Logic is based on premises which lead to conclusion. Conclusions lead to either certainty or probability. You have to have a reason for accepting a conclusion. False premises breed false conclusions. Yeah, that's why I said in the past, make sure your premises are in order. Be careful. Learn to detect nonsense. Question everything. Nothing is off limits. That's right. Now he continues on with 8.2.15. Winnowing. I don't know what that is. Finding 9. Finding the argument. 10. Define terms. 11. Reasoning, deductive and inductive. 12. Spotting fallacies. 13. Note the structure. 14. Compare expectations to experience. 15. More and further. Next heading is rhetoric. Communicate. Rhetoric is communication. Aristotle called it the available means of persuasion. Yeah. That's why I say, language is the prison in which you are. Language is the prison within which you can express yourself, but it's also used to control you. That's why Aristotle here, the elitist piece of crap that he is, calls it available means of persuasion. Yeah, persuasion of who? Not of his peers, right? Almost everything we communicate, we want to be believed. We want to persuade, to entertain, to instruct. The best way to learn is to teach. It's not enough to simply understand. We've created a structure and now we've got to deliver it. Even a single word or a gesture can communicate meaning. Everything around us is context. Who are we speaking to? We must choose our words wisely. Always be on the lookout for the right words at the right moment. Now 16 to 24. 16, the paraphrase. 17, the rhetorical triangle. 18, 5 canons of rhetoric. 19, topics of invention. 20, the 3 appeals. 21, learning transfer. 22, kairos and stasis. No idea what that is. 23, write outlines. 24, social skills. Keep in mind that these skills are not meant to be learned all at once or understood immediately. They are skills, they need time to develop. You have to use them to practice. Nobody gets this stuff overnight, and you can always be refining your technique, no matter what your skill level is. Do not be discouraged by what lies ahead of you. Instead, realize that the way to greatness has never been through gimmicks or tricks, but through hard work applied consistently over long periods of time. I've made the task a little bit easier for you, but the work is yours and yours alone. They say it takes 30 days to form a new habit, but it takes 6 months to change the brain. That 6-month point is where you really start making connections and things get interesting. Next heading. These tools are presented at the beginner's level, but they are worthy of a master's use. Now some quotes. One by Bruce Lee. Preparation for tomorrow is hard work today. One by Henry Ford. Nothing is particularly hard if you divide it into small jobs. Scrolling through some empty page here. Grammar is the next heading. Quote open. The building blocks. Quote close. Deconstruction. When going mountain climbing, you do not reach the top of the mountain in one move. You begin by taking a small step, followed by another, and so on, until eventually you reach the summit. What starts off as a daunting task is accomplished through the simplest of means, taking small steps. Deconstruction is a similar thing. Whatever the problem is that you're working on, no matter how challenging or difficult, if you just break it down into smaller parts, then the whole thing becomes more manageable. This is the secret to getting big projects done. Incrementally, right? Think of a child exploring a new toy robot, tinkering with it, seeing what makes its parts move, what holds it together, can it be fixed once it's broken? The child is very innocent and knows little or nothing about toy robots. It lets curiosity be the guide in discovering just what this thing is. You want to be like that child. You cannot assume you know much of anything about your subject as you turn it over, inspect it, consider the various parts, etc. Don't be influenced in your exploration by outside sources. When starting with a big subject, seek the picture first to get a general sense of the territory, and then work towards identifying the smaller pieces. Break it down until you get to pieces small enough for you to deal with head-on, developing your reservoir of understanding, and then build from the ground up. Connect pieces together like a puzzle. The, quote open, for dummies, quote close, learning series are great books for learning the basics of a subject and identifying the smaller moving parts. I'd come to see deconstruction as a necessary tool early on, but I didn't have a term for it until I read Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Chef. He has a few of his own suggestions for deconstruction. Brackets open. Reducing, interviewing, reversal, translation. Brackets close. But his idea to interview an expert is on point. Someone has already excelled in the thing that you were learning will be a great resource for you. They can give you information that is most helpful for you, considering your interest in the topic. Let me give you an example of deconstruction for my children's messy bedroom. One day my kids told me that they like to keep their room messy. Being a curious and agreeable father, I allowed them to keep their room messy for a while. I think they just like the chaos, the untidy aesthetic. Unfortunately for them, after about a month or two of this, I decided it was enough and told them it was time to clean up. They moaned and groaned, but they agreed that it was getting to be a bit too messy and that it should be cleaned up. But only on the condition that I'd help. I decided to make it an object lesson. I was going to teach how to recognize chaos. So we sorted the mess into little piles of toys according to their likeness. We had a pile for vehicles, for figurines, for Legos, and so on. After about 20 minutes we had everything sorted into little piles, and then we put everything in its right place. It was an easy way to demonstrate the skill of deconstruction in a non-studying environment, and they also got some experience with the important habit of noticing the similarities and differences in things. Brackets open, see topics of invention, brackets close. We could have started in one corner of the room and put everything away as it went along, but it would have taken much longer. By breaking the job down into smaller parts, we got it done quickly and easily. Next heading, taking notes, annotation. Whenever you find yourself in a learning situation, you should be taking notes. This applies the most to book learning. But even when you start a new job, you can learn so much better by taking notes. This is one of the most valuable skills you could ever develop. Taking notes helps you to begin collecting and start organizing knowledge. Write in your books. I was always... No, that sentence is... I need to correct this. I always thought it was wrong to write in my books, but now I think the opposite is true. Own your book. The best way to really get in touch with it is to write your notes inside of it. Mortimer Adler called it active reading, when taking notes while reading, stopping to underline unknown words, jotting down sudden thoughts that arise while reading, making comments about the ideas, etc. He called it active listening, when taking notes while someone was speaking. The term active distinguishes your activity from the term passive, which is how most of us have learned to absorb information, passively, not questioning things much. Not engaging with the material, just blah. All of this is now behind you. From now on, you're going to underline things, circle things, make little marks of symbols, jot down questions and comments, and otherwise own the very thing that you are studying. Note-taking doesn't have to be boring either. You can and should make it very visual. When I'm not writing in a book, I have a piece of paper with me, and you'll see in my notes varying sizes in writing, key terms outlined or boxed in, little pictures, arrows, exclamations, highlighting of any kind, distinguishable writing that helps me to organize the information without having to look at rows of just words. Get creative. Look into things like learning maps, cognitive maps, and Adler's annotation for more clues. Hey Chuck, what's up? Another aspect on note-taking that is more hidden but no less important is the way in which this skill helps your brain to form more organized neural connections. Yeah. That's what they taught us at lower school. That's a system we used to have here in the Netherlands. Classes 1 to 6 were in one school. Nowadays that's different. But I think it was at 4th class or something. That would be like 4th grade, I guess. 5th grade. That the teacher, he forced us to take notes on certain things that he was teaching us. And he said that it's not specifically because he wanted to see us writing, but that by hearing and writing things, hearing something and then copying it down on paper, there's more neurons at work in your brain forming your memory. That's how we explained it anyway. Right? So, helps your brain to form more organized neural connections. By using notes as a way to make sense of the information, your brain has less work to do in making connections and finding a place for all this new stuff to go. Spaced repetition is the next heading. How many times have you been up late, cramming for a test the next day? We've all been there. Even though I was always a good test taker, I still had my moments of frustration when I was just hours from a test and I didn't understand the key concept. Luckily, I mostly studied in smaller chunks of time in the weeks leading up to a test. You see, I was lazy, so I learned each section as it was covered in class, doing only enough work to understand the material. When it was time for a test, I aced most subjects without putting as much effort in as other students. It turns out my laziness had some scientific backing. It's called spacing effect. To borrow from Wikipedia, the spacing effect is a phenomena whereby animals, including humans, more easily remember or learn items when they are studied at few times spaced over a long time span rather than repeatedly studied in a short span of time. In other words, don't try and learn everything all at once. The brain responds well when it is given large chunks of information followed by an appropriate time to organize it all. In his 4-Hour Chef, Tim Ferriss talks about the serial position effect, which shows how the learning process is slowest in the middle of a long session, but not the beginning and end. Basically what this means is that in the 90-minute study session, memory retention dips around the halfway point. But if you break up the session into two 45-minute segments with a 10-minute break in between, retention goes up dramatically. So even if you see dips in learning at the halfway point or in the 45-minute session, it will still not be as bad as doing a full 90-minute session all at once. Research shows that cramming has good results in the short term, which means that it works to help you remember the information, but not for very long. If you're learning something you want to really know, use spaced repetition exclusively. But if you have a test the next day, then cramming will also come to your aid. Discover the facts. Discover the history of a subject is the next heading. Nothing exists in a vacuum. It's a nice one. You can look at that in different ways. Nothing exists in a vacuum. No thing exists in a vacuum. Does it mean that there's really nothing there, or does it mean that nothing actually exists? If you get my meaning. Everything you want to learn, any skill or subject, has a history. By looking into the history of a thing, we may gain greater insight into exactly what it is for, and what it might be in the future. A friend told me a story once. He was tutoring a teenager that wanted to learn calculus. My friend's advice was simple. Seek the history of calculus first. Yeah. That goes way back. Again to India. Most probably. Within a few months, the teenager had gone on and studied calculus, starting with history, and was able to take the equivalence exams at community college. By knowing the history, the student had a better understanding of the subject. What led to its origin? What historical, social, scientific and other contexts did it arise in? Who are some of the leading figures? How has it evolved over time? What is its relevance today? There's another quote here or something. To know where you're going, you need to know where you've been. Yeah, it's something like if you don't know your history, then you don't know where you're going. Next heading, distinguishing materials. In his video presentation, How to Read a Book, Mortimer Adler instructs us early on to distinguish the type of book we're reading. Is it for fun? Is it instructive? Is it informative? It's very important for us to know what kind of information we're taking in to ensure the best outcome in our learning. When encountering information that is meant to teach us about a subject, we should first ask if we're dealing with what is called a primary source. Yeah. Reminds me of something a friend told me once. I think he's quite correct. He said the older your sources are, what would he say? The older the information is, what did he say? I think it was something like the older the books are. Everything is the same, right? Sources, information, books. The closer you are to the source, right? So primary source. That can be a very old one. Primary sources are original materials, right? So, like scribbles made by ancient people, for instance. Those could be considered primary sources. A new book can also be considered a primary source. Usually, though, when people write books, they need to find sources for themselves to make your book a bit more of quality. You know, you can say, well, this is the source for this information, and that's the source for that information. Primary sources are original materials, unaltered by outside interpretation or translation. Yeah, that's the whole problem with the whole Indian stuff. The translators alter the original. Seek primary sources whenever possible, although the older a text topic is, the more difficult this may become. Yeah. Most of the great books were written in languages other than English, and so have been translated many times in order for us to gain from their wisdom. For some students, the primary source written in its original language is the only thing that will suffice. For others, a very good translation will do. Sometimes it's fruitful to compare translation. Yeah. As not all are created equally. Primary sources are crucial in studying history. For example, American public schools teach how Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered his friends, the Native Americans. This is taught by teachers that are not using primary sources, and the true history paints a much different and much less friendly picture than the whitewash that schooling provides. Yeah, like the Vikings been there, and there's even evidence apparently that the Chinese have been there long before Columbus. Primary sources give a more accurate depiction of events than heavily biased, even fraudulent government schooling ever will. If you're reading specifically to uplift and strengthen the mind, Plato, Aristotle, or anything of that caliber will do. Well, I have to disagree there, you know. Plato is an elitist piece of crap. That's what he is. He wasn't writing for us, the normal people. He was writing for a ruling class. thinking that no normal human being would ever read his stuff. If he ever wrote anything, by the way. He wasn't teaching to farmers, right? He was only teaching to those that he deemed a member of the ruling class. He's an elitist piece of crap is what he is. So I don't recommend reading Plato. On the contrary, skip all of that if you can. Aristotle maybe, but I have my doubts about him also. All those big names from the past. We've been mind controlled for ages through people like Plato. And yeah, I know it's an ad hominem when I call him a piece of crap, but go read start reading his stuff if you're there, and see the elitist standpoint that he has. You know, he goes on in the beginning of the Republic. He sneaks you into a story where it is better for him to decide to do with your stuff. He will decide for you what's best for you in a very sneaky way. Well, your friend is sick and you have to take care of his stuff. Yeah, your friend is sick because you made him sick. You made him not being able to use his own mind. It's a very elitist point of view. Damn, this stuff makes me angry. Next heading. This type of reading is not driven primarily by a thirst for the ideas, but a chance for the practice. Next heading, selection. What you're looking for in selection are the things that are most important to learn first. Seek the essentials. When you strip something down to its core, what are you left with? What do you have to have in order to know this thing? And another thing about this Plato, he copied his stuff from the ancient Indian writings. You know, luckily for me, I've done years and years of reading this Indian crap. And he just copied it from there. Including the all-encompassing absolute property stuff, which he calls world of forms. Which he has absolutely no proof for it even exists. What he calls, quote-unquote, the good. Unbelievable. It's used to control you. That's what it's for. Calls you an it. As if you're of no worth at all. That's what he calls you. He's a piece of crap is what he is. When you strip something down to its core, what are you left with? What do you have to have in order to know this thing? Yeah. Realization. When beginning to study geometry, you don't attempt to learn it all at once. You deconstruct and work your way up. Selection reminds us to choose wisely which pieces to learn first and which can wait for later on. It may not always be easy to find that 20%, but now you know to look for it. What's this 20%? And always remember to contact professionals to help you with your direction. In the early 1900s, Italian economist Alfredo Pareto discovered that 20% of his pods contained 80% of his peas. Well, that's odd. Starting from there, he later realized that 80% of the land was owned by only 20% of the population. Others have explored this work in other fields and have expanded the concept into what is now called the 80-20 principle. A good way of putting it is this. When learning something new, what is the 20% of activity or understanding that will give you 80% of the result you're looking for? You're trying to learn astrophysics, but do you need to know every single thing about it? Or can you focus your studies like a laser on the 20% of knowledge that is the most universal? Excuse me, guys. In Kung Fu, there are certain basic movements and body mechanics that apply to all of the most advanced moves. First, learn the basics, the universal, must-have knowledge, and then you will be ready to receive the advanced teachings. More than that, by learning the basic moves, you are learning to streamline your attack and to use the least amount of bodily energy to inflict the most amount of damage. Watch an old Tai Chi master pushing hands with a student. When that student flies back 10 feet from the smallest movement of the master, that is the reason why. Yeah. Reminds me of Aikido. In Aikido you also learn how to use your opponent's energy against him. What is the 20% of activity or understanding that will give you 80% of the result you're looking for? Next heading, concentration. I've tried writing this section a few times, but I keep getting distracted. First it was my phone making noises. I posted something on Facebook today and I'm getting notifications about people's comments. Got to check those. Then my girlfriend was home from work and struck up a conversation. Then I thought, maybe I've been sitting too long and I should work out for a little bit. Then shortly after that I got a little hungry, so I made a snack. There goes my phone again. I'm up to 36 likes. Oh my god, fracking Facebook. Ugh, what was that one thing I wanted to Google yesterday? Something about tire pressure in the summer? Wait, no, that was something else. But I want to see what kind of deals they have at Goodyear right now. Oh my god, what is this going on about? This is about distractions, right? Blah blah. More distractions. Here it goes on. Concentration is absolutely essential to learning. Without it, literally nothing gets done. Well, at least not anything you're intending to get done. You might check 13 emails, draft your will, iron a shirt, and take the dog for a walk. But you didn't sit down and read that book or write that paper. Alright. You sure as hell didn't meet your goals for the day. Alright. There are many things out there to help you learn to concentrate. One comes from Opitz, O-P-I-T-Z, who said that you must sit down to read, and whenever you find your mind wandering, grab it by the scruff of its neck and bring it back to the page. It works. Yeah, you should always have control of your own mind. My own personal suggestion is to study Tai Chi, as it requires mental and physical concentration unlike anything else I've encountered. Blah, blah. Logic is the next heading. Quote open. These are not those. Quote close. Now he goes on. Next heading. Winnowing. W-I-N-N-O-W-I-N-G. I'm not sure if I even pronounced that correctly. The basic function of logic in the trivium method is organization, and to organize we must make distinction. Alright. If that is true, then my understanding of it is incorrect. I mean, the basic function of logic, and as far as I'm concerned anyway, is to discern truth from nonsense, to get rid of contradictions. I suppose that is also organization, I guess. We must separate things according to their likeness. We weigh things against each other and eliminate the contradictions. Yeah. Human beings are sometimes referred to as the rational animal, and rational comes from the word ratio, which is a mathematical distinction between two integers. It's a way of telling things apart, or of saying these are not those. Yeah, that sounds like organizing, right? But that, to me, that's more like grammar part. You know, you distinguish the different building blocks in their places. But if you study trivium, you will find out that grammar and logic, they kind of go together. And you move from grammar to logic, and back to grammar, and back to logic. One of the discoveries I made when first researching the trivium is that the secret society of the Freemasons uses the liberal arts and sciences in their initiation system. Yep. Knowing nothing about the organization other than internet conspiracy theory. Yeah, this is funny, right? Now you open the bracket, and then there's 3 terms there with an etc. And the 3 terms are Illuminati, Bilderberg, reptilian overlords. Alright? Now reptilian overlords is absolute rubbish, but Bilderberg, I mean, it exists. There's no conspiracy about, no conspiracy theory there. It's a fact. Depending on your definition of conspiracy theory, right? I followed my curiosity and sought out the context in which they taught these things. Separated into 3 degrees, the Blue Lodge of Freemason begins by guiding the members to focus on personal development of character and virtue in the 1st degree. I will be covering this a little bit more later on in the section on emotional development. After providing the tools for developing character, the member goes on to the 2nd degree, where the major focus is on the trivium and quadrivium. Their 3rd degree focuses more on spiritual contemplation and mortality. Yeah. What about the oath they take? Why is there no mention of that here? You know, this sounds like a neutral description of what Masons do, what Freemasons do. They're a bunch of creeps. So first they instruct the member to work on their emotions, then on their mind. Yeah. The emotions are a part of your mind. Mind is thinking, feeling, and wanting. Right? So emotions go as a part of your mind. And then finally on that which is considered spiritual. Yeah. Rather dogmatic, I would say. They do all of this through ritual utilizing symbols, metaphor, and allegory. You know, you hear talk about these Freemasons. Well, it's Satan worship, right? Who the frack is Satan? You know? Do you really believe that exists? One symbol in particular is important to be aware of, the threshing floor. Without going into details about the biblical source from which this symbol is derived, the threshing floor is a checkered floor composed of black and white tiles, and it is there that the process of winnowing, of separating the wheat from the chaff, is accomplished. Yeah, those are real Masonic terms, right? The symbol is described in various ways by numerous authors, but my own personal understanding of it is as a representation of human function of discernment, of knowing one thing from another. The black and white squares are a universal symbol for this process of discernment. And I don't think that's it. I really don't. And then you have the activity of winnowing itself, yet another way to understand the human function of rationality. Masons often understand hello Dan. Masons often understand this process of winnowing to represent the activity of ridding oneself on the superfluities of vices and vices within them, of separating the important from the unimportant, the essential from the inessential. It is said that Solomon's temple was built upon the threshing floor. The temple is, to my understanding, a symbol for the developed human mind and soul.
The very word secrecy is
Oh, and that's the end. Ah! Thanks everybody in the chat, and on Del, Dan, Jax, Joe, Jules, Chucky, and on. This is the end of my radio show. We will continue this next week. Take care, everybody.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific cast